go ahead and get started. Welcome to the April 3rd Site Plan Committee subgroup meeting for Crystal Towers 3. I have this preamble that I'm required to read. We're holding a hybrid public meeting which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia for the Planning Commission's electronic meeting policy adopted on July 7, 2022. Members of the SPRC subgroup for Crystal Towers 3 are participating here both in person and virtually through electronic means. And the subgroup members participating virtually include Joe McIntyre from C2E2, Jim Lantelmi from Planning Commission, I think that might be it for now. Please let me know if there's someone else who's participating virtually, who's representing someone, some entity in the subgroup. No, I don't think so. Okay, excellent. At this time, I'd like to orient everyone to our hybrid environment and cover a few specifics about how the meeting will run. Members of the public may attend here in person or electronically using the Teams link provided on the SPRC webpage, the project webpage, the county's events calendar, and the email notifications sent to SPRC email subscribers. And there's a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. For our subgroup members joining virtually, if you lose internet connection during the meeting, please reconnect by phone. Keep your phones and devices muted until you're called upon. Turn off sound to any devices around you to minimize interference. Please turn off your video feed until we have our discussion. The meeting chat is active to serve two purposes: for the SPRC subgroup members who are joining us virtually who need technical assistance, and for members of the public to let us know that you would like to speak during public comment at the end of the meeting. The chat is not used for discussions. All comments have to be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public comment period. If subgroup members participating virtually wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the course of the meeting, turn on your video feed and raise your hand, your virtual hand in the Teams forum. I'll monitor the video feed that are on as an indicator of who would like to speak. And subgroup members who are participating via phone today without the video option, announce your name and the group you're representing now, and then I will verbally check in with you to see if you'd like to be recognized. Are there any subgroup members joining us via phone?
We do have one phone number. I'm not sure.
Ms. Turner, are you joining as part of a group?
No, I'm not. I'm just an individual citizen.
Excellent. So if you do want to speak at the end of the meeting, put that into the public comment and turn off your video feed for now. Thank you.
Okay.
And turn off any other devices so there's no feedback. Thank you. And thanks for joining us. Okay. So here we are. For members of the public who'd like to provide feedback and comment, you'll be called on at the end of the meeting and you'll be given a couple of moments to speak. If you wish to speak, enter your name in the meeting chat. And this is a public forum. So with that, yeah, anything associated with the meeting tonight, written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. That's fairly standard for all of our meetings now. With that, I'd like to do introductions. Let's do the SPRC members first with your name and affiliation. I'm Elizabeth Garrett. I'm a member of the Planning Commission, and I'm chairing this on behalf of James Schroll, who is in the hospital with his wife expecting their first baby. Judy?
Judy Freshman, Crystal City Civic Association.
Evan Hine, Visitor Advisory Committee.
Chris Slack, Transportation Commission.
Kate Donahue, Forestry and Natural Resources Commission.
So.
And online, Mr. Lantelmi?
Yeah, hi, Jim Lantelmi, Planning Commission.
Thank you. Mr. Dowell?
Yes, good evening. Mike Dow, the new Crystal and Pentagon City Council Chair. Thank you.
Ben DeMonso, are you representing a group in the subgroup?
Yeah, I'm representing Aurora Highlands.
Excellent, thank you. And staff, please. Ms. Badger?
This is Courtney Badger with the Planning Division.
Joanne Gabor, DES.
Oh, hi, everybody. Adam Watson, Arlington County Planning Division.
Thank you. Walter?
Hi, everyone. Walter Gonzalez, the Department of Parks and Recreation.
I believe we also have Laura Schaub on the line with our Planning Division as well.
Yep, Laura Schaub, Urban Design. Nice to see you all.
Thank you.
And Joan McIntyre, Climate Change, Energy and Environment Commission.
Thank you, Joan. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to overlook you. I already had you on my list. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and then applicant.
Robert Vaughn, Wet Properties, the applicant.
Lauren Helgeson, Studio 39, landscape architect.
You again, Louise Bertie with Grove Slate Transportation.
And Jake Hermley, Grove Slate, also transportation.
Excellent, thank you. All right, I think that's.
Online, Nick Cummings, Walsh Colucci, land use attorney. I would have been there in person this evening, but my kids gave me the stomach flu, so here I am.
I'm sorry, Nick. Hope you have a speedy recovery. Thank you. All right, with that, Ms. Badger, do we begin with presentations?
Yes. So I will get this loaded up. I will be giving a presentation on behalf of staff along with Joanne Gabor. Let me just get loaded up here. And I'm going to, for the sake of not being redundant, I'm going to try to keep this brief because I know the applicant will touch on many of the same points. But just to kind of refresh your memory and prime you where we are, the applicant has submitted for 2 new buildings on the Crystal Towers block. They're infill buildings, a residential building, about where my laser pointer is, and a 1-story retail building to the north of that. And you can see the corresponding elevations on the right. A couple of updates to the project since last time we talked. I mentioned this last time, there is a deviation from the Crystal City Sector Plan that recommends that podium should engage the recommended build-to line within 2 feet for a minimum of 80% of the frontage. Previously, they were not meeting that. They have since responded to our staff comments and updated so that they are within that 2-foot engagement with the build-to line for approximately 60% of the frontage. And it's a little bit tough to see in the renderings here, but you can see on the plan view on the bottom. The second update is the podium separation. The sector plan has guidance that there should be a minimum of 40-foot podium separation. Previously, they were showing a 30-foot separation. They've now updated it to a 40-foot separation. And just to kind of refresh where we're talking about, it's between the Crystal Flats building, which is existing, the very most left building on this view, and the new residential building. And then I'm going to briefly mention this, and I know the applicant's going to go into much more detail on this, but we heard at the last SPRC meeting there was interest in having this pedestrian area between the buildings have a connection through it. So the applicant has submitted this concept of a potential connection that goes through that and around to 18th Street. And I'll let them kind of get into more details about that in their presentation. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Joanne Gabor to talk about transportation.
Thanks, Courtney. This is the same information that we presented before, just to let folks know. On East Street, we are going to be having an enhanced bicycle facility, which is going to mimic what is going to be installed in front of that park between the 12th and 15th Street block. So it will be a raised median and then the bike lane against the curb with the parking outboard. There are some areas the south that we are still having to work with the fire marshal to understand what can be built there to make sure there's fire access for the proposed building and try and provide as much protection as we can for the bicycle facility. So that's still being worked out, but we believe we have a path forward. And then on 18th Street, I know one of the big questions folks have been asking about is the median. So originally there was a median on 18th Street in front of the driveway entrances on the north and south side. That has been removed for construction. When our project is completed this fall, the median will be returned. So all those driveway entrances, again, on the north and south side of 18th Street in this vicinity will be right in, right out only. And then parking and circulation, there is going to be some new garage access And I believe the applicant will talk about that a little more in depth. They are looking at a 0.3 residential parking ratio. This does reduce spaces for the existing units on site, but it does provide bicycle parking for the retail and the residential units. In addition, there are additional loading docks that will be utilized for the proposed buildings.
Okay, thanks, Joanne. So now shifting over to open space. So the sector plan identifies the space on 15th Street and South 8th Street as an existing open space, and that's number 18. It's labeled as an existing park plaza, and the recommendation is to have it a landscaped corner with trees and paths, which is what's there now. It does call for a target size of 6,000 square feet with an asterisk that that's subject to refinement. And I just want to go into just a little bit of history on this corner. So when the LOFS 590 was approved back in February of 2002, it was approved with the condition that they record a public access easement on this corner. So they did that in 2004, and that size is roughly 4,300 square feet. The applicant for this project is now proposing to add on to that and to add approximately 700 square foot public access easement. So it would bring the space up to over 5,000 square feet. You can see on the left-hand side the very rough rendering of where the existing public access easement is. It's in that green area, and then the reddish orange is what is proposed to be added to that. On the right-hand side, you can see a preliminary concept of what improvements could be made to that area as the applicant works to refine it further. Looking at the landscape plan holistically, these numbers are from the plans that are in our system, and I understand they've been updated recently, so the applicant will correct these numbers. But the point is they are removing trees and they are planting new trees, and we'll get more into the details of that as we discuss. The overall canopy coverage that was in the plan set that was reviewed is about an 18.3%. The Crystal City Sector Plan recommends a 17.6%, so they're right in that similar. Briefly talking about sustainability and community benefits, they are participating in the Green Building Incentive Program, coming in at the 2.5 FAR level. So this includes meeting the baseline prerequisites that are required for that program, and they are also doing the LEED Gold certification. They are also proposing new solar on the existing Crystal Tower building. The other community benefits that they are earning is still being negotiated, but it will be based on the goals of the Crystal City Sector Plan, falling into these three categories that we have here: affordable housing, open space, and transportation. So with that kind of concludes our presentation. I'll just briefly talk about next steps. We're at the second SPRC meeting. Our next step is to go to commission meetings, Transportation, Housing, Planning Commission, and then on to the County Board. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Commissioner Guerin. And I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you. That was very efficient. That was 6 minutes. Thank you. Okay. Turning this over to the applicant.
Thank you.
That's a maximum of 15 minutes.
Maximum 15 minutes. I anticipate being more than 6.
Yes. Then we can get to discussion at 7:30.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Robert Vaughn. I'm head of development for Dweck Properties, and here today to talk about our Crystal Towers 3 application. As a brief summary, I'll go through the revisions in a little bit more detail than staff. I will talk about parking, both existing and proposed, as well as our strategy for pickup and drop-off. Talk about the changes to site circulation, the changes and really modernization of the each street, streetscape and sidewalks. Talk a lot about trees, both impacts as well as the proposed plantings. Get into a little bit more detail about open space, and then also talk about sustainability, as well as touching very briefly on construction phasing at the end. To orient everybody, we are on the Crystal Towers property, and really the portion of the Crystal Towers property fronting southeast, but this is the block, just 1 block south of Amazon's new Mets buildings, and bounded by 15th, Fern, 18th, So as staff's presentation noted, in response to the comments received during SPRC 1, we have revised the podium separation to meet the 40-foot design guideline from the sector plan. We have been able to find a way to incorporate through block pedestrian access utilizing a fully ADA compliant ramp. And then we also have taken a fresh approach towards the concept of what that south sidewalk area could be, putting additional overhead lighting, specialty paving, as well as working in additional plantings. And then we have revised the retail frontage. So jumping into the podium separation, the original application included 30-foot separation between the north portion of Crystal Flats and the south portion of the proposed building. That has been revised to 40 feet. Along with those changes, we have had to rework the back of house corridor. We have lost a little bit of retail space, and we've also had to scale down the size of the bike room. But the benefit of that is that it allowed us additional space to rethink what the experience in that south sidewalk could be. And so here we have a continual ramp that goes from each street, moving left across the page. It meets an elevation where you have the back of house corridor coming that provides access to the pet spa and bicycle storage facility, and then ramps up again to move over around Crystal Flats. The one thing I would note, and one of the reasons that this became relatively complicated, was how do we keep the outdoor dining for the retail at an elevation consistent with the sidewalk? So we've done that through the incorporation of a retaining wall. So this will be a retaining wall here. So you will have essentially a flat elevation for the outdoor retail dining that is accessible off of the sidewalk. This area will ramp up, and then you'll have a flat spot again, providing access into the building, and then you'll have another section of ramping. We've also been able to think about this in a way really taking the SPRC comments for how do we interject more green space. So we've worked in a dog relief area and additional planting. One of the unfortunate impacts that we realized when we continued that concept all the way through was that we were able to get people around Crystal Flats, but then they had nowhere to go. And so we have introduced a sidewalk that connects that pedestrian passage down to 18th Street. But as you can see in the photo on the bottom left, that is currently existing parking, and we would need to remove 4 additional trees in order to accommodate that sidewalk connection. So I'm sure we can talk about that in more detail later. And then on the revised retail, based on continued discussions with staff, we have been able to revise the engagement of that retail frontage to meet the 2-foot distance from the record of the build-to line for about 60%. The portion that has remained at 5 feet is really in coordination with the location of the underground electrical vault. So that's what's really driving our inability to bring the entirety of the frontage out. And so here, we didn't have sufficient time in order to develop the specific rendering that might show this best, but you can see the previous submission on the left. And then on the revised plan, you can see how that facade starts to step out. So it steps out about 3 feet to create that to create the 2-foot engagement with the build-to line. So now moving on, talking about parking. The existing Crystal Towers building has 931 parking spaces. And so that's divided up between surface parking spaces, a single level of below-grade parking underneath Crystal Towers, and then additional parking located in Lost 590. We have been monitoring utilization over the past several years, and utilization has typically trended between 0.75 to 0.8. And at 0.8, that would imply a kind of in-place demand of 730 spaces. And so one of the core elements that was driving the plan from its inception was we knew that we had underutilized surface parking. And how could we potentially think about reutilizing or repurposing that existing parking in a way that was more productive, but that left sufficient parking to meet in-place demand. So the plan proposes to remove 166 surface spaces. And overall, that leaves 737 spaces to serve the existing Crystal Towers building. So additionally, we have found 30 surface spaces that would be allocated towards the single-story retail, which we think will provide significant interest from tenants and help to differentiate us in the market from much of the retail that is either being constructed or being proposed in this area where there is little to no retail parking allocated. So for the new building, we are proposing to construct 1 level of below-grade parking that is attached to and accessed from the existing Crystal Towers single-level garage. That would include 42 additional spaces. And then we are utilizing 22 spaces that currently exist within the Crystal Towers parking garage in order to meet the 64 spaces that provides the 0.3 parking ratio. So now pick up, drop off. In our conversations with residents, one of the things that quickly became apparent was the focus on the kind of ease of pickup, drop off, given the existing condition. And so as part of the plan, we have worked in this kind of entry courtyard circulation that allows us pick up, drop off for up to 10 spaces. And I think we would actually be able to fit more than that in actual utilization, and then also provides us the ability for 4 kind of box trucks or delivery trucks, in addition to just the passenger vehicles. Talking a little bit about changes to circulation. This is the existing vehicular and pedestrian circulation. The primary access route, at least when I go there, is coming off of Eads, coming up the driveway, going to the drop-off, and doing what you would need to do. And then you have the ability to circle back around to go out onto Eads, to circle through the property to go out onto 18th, or to circle all the way around the property going up to Fern. The current garage has 1 access point off of each street and 2 exit points, 1 on the south side and 1 on the north side. And looking at the proposed circulation, one of the goals we had was to keep many of the circulation paths accessible from what exists today. So you still have the ability to come off of Eads, to circle around this internal courtyard and go back out, to circle around through the extended driveway down to 18th. One of the significant changes we have made is to consolidate those 3 points, the 1 entry point, the 2 exit points, into a single expanded and renovated access point that would be both entry and exit at the south side. And this would coincide with striping changes to the interior to accommodate the new 2-way traffic. Additionally, the proposal includes the additional pedestrian route to the extent somebody would like to cut the corner. Again, with the trade-off of the 4 trees that I mentioned earlier, but provides access around Crystal Flats to the extent somebody wants to utilize the new south sidewalk. And looking at the existing streetscape, one of the real benefits I believe this project is providing is to modernize the streetscape on this section of Eads. So it trends between 7.5 feet down to just under 5 feet. But for the portion as you approach 15th Street, the sidewalk narrows significantly and is under 5 feet in many locations. In the new proposal, we have a minimum 8-foot clear sidewalk, the entirety from 15th connecting to the sidewalk that was installed for Crystal Flats. It also provides modern streetscape with street trees, light poles, as well as shy zones for the retail. In terms of pedestrian site access, again, one of the goals of the project was to maintain the site access and desire lines that exist today. So we have really replicated all of them, but have found a way to add an additional pedestrian path circling around Crystal Flats. And then we do have some changes proposed up at the existing open space at the corner of 15th and Eads that we think simplifies it, as well as takes some of the additional circulation and translate it into additional planting area. This was a request coming out of SPRC 1, was to see if we could develop a rendering that showed the impact of that new streetscape. So if you have been out there recently, this looks very, very different than it exists today. Even with the existing 5-foot sidewalk, some of the hedges very mature and are edging into that 5-foot area. So here you would have the retail with 3-foot shy zone, 8-foot clear sidewalk, and a standard 6-foot tree pit. In terms of green roof, one of the focuses that we had from the outset was to try and incorporate green roof where we could. And so the plan includes over 27,000 square feet of green roof and over 6,000 square feet of intensive green roof. So the extensive green roof would be placed over top of the new buildings. And then the intensive green roof is where we have the proposed building connecting into the existing canopy, as well as over top of the existing lobby that gives us the type of soil depth that we would need to sustain real plants, small shrubs, etc. In terms of trees, we understand that an impact of the project is that we are removing a number of trees. So based on the latest count, that we are proposing to remove 76 trees, and we're proposing to plant 100 trees within the site plan area. We have also gone and looked on the balance of the property, and we have found potential locations for up to an additional 16 trees. And that's something that we plan to continue to revisit to see if there are additional opportunities. And thinking about the trees, we tried to kind of break down the categories for why are the trees being removed. So there are 4 trees being removed due to poor health that would likely have to be replaced anyways. 15 are in conflict with kind of modernized streetscapes, and many of them would be located in the center of the clear zone to the extent we were just to modernize the streetscape and do nothing else. And then there are 32 being removed for the proposed development and 25 non-native being removed for the proposed development. So here we have diagrams that takes those categories and helps to visualize where each of those trees is located. The one thing I would note is coming out of the last SPRC, we have gone back and looked at the plan and found 3 additional native trees that are located kind of within that existing driveway area that we are planning to try and preserve. But you can see where the trees located within conflict with the modernized streetscape set, the trees that are native but are being proposed to be removed for the development, and then many of the non-native trees are in and around that existing driveway. And here you can see the same thing moving farther to the north up 15th, where the proposed retail is located. So in summary, the proposal includes the removal of 76 trees that fall into a variety of categories. We are proposing to plant 116 trees, and of that 116, 100 would be within the site plan area. Due to the difference in the tree replacement value calculation, largely due to the fact that we are removing a number of very mature trees and we would be planting not mature trees, a contribution will be made to the Arlington County Canopy Fund based on a final landscape. So on the open space, adding on to the information that staff presented, the one additional note that I would make is that when Lots 590 was constructed and when the easement at the corner was provided, as well as when the sector plan was created, Lots 590 and Crystal Towers had common ownership. And so this, like many instances in Crystal City, allowed for certain thoughts that because ownership has subsequently transferred are very difficult to try and figure out how to adjudicate today. So of the 6,000 square feet that is located generally at the corner, it appears that a certain portion looks like it falls on Lots 590's property and a certain portion falls on Crystal Towers property. So the 700 square feet that we are proposing to add on to the existing easement gets that open space area up above 5,000 square feet. And then just looking at the diagram, it appears that the remaining 1,000 square feet or so falls on Lots 590 property that could be provided at some point in the future to the extent they were to move forward. But we do feel that we are kind of advancing the goals of the sector plan. And so here's another location where you do have a very small sidewalk in the existing condition. If you've been out there, this existing diagram is actually a little bit outdated because of the work going on from METS, where they've been adding in the protected bike lane and the bus shelter. But that area does have less than a 6-foot sidewalk. So one of the key enhancements that we looked at was how do we expand that sidewalk given what we think will be the increase in pedestrian traffic? And then how do we incorporate additional elements that help to define that pocket park and provide it a use as opposed to just being a landscaped area provided for circulation. And so you can see the outdoor area with public tables and chairs that we think will be utilized not only by our proposed retail, but by the retail that's coming all along each street with Amazon opening up. We have expanded landscape zones and expanded plantings that we think will help to address this. I'll go really fast. So here's the existing condition, and here's the proposed condition, which we believe is an improvement. On sustainability, we're meeting the prerequisites for the 0.25 bonus FAR. One of the things I do want to touch on, because it is a little bit new, is for the renewable energy. Compliance pathway 1 for on-site renewable energy would require approximately a 35 kilowatt solar array on the building. Given a lot of the restrictions around roof area, we are instead proposing a 65 kilowatt array located on a portion of the existing Crystal Towers North building. So almost double the total amount of solar provided, but in a way that I don't believe anybody has proposed, where it would be located adjacent, right, part of the same site plan, but on the existing building instead of us reverting back and just buying credits or something like that. On EV charging, this is still something that we are in the process of evaluating, but today we're committing to 4 EV charging spaces with 10 additional spaces EV ready. We do anticipate that this number will climb up as we advance to Planning Commission. For construction, it's a 24-month duration on the multifamily building and a 12-month duration on the retail. The baseline phasing is that these projects would deliver at the same time. So we would start the retail approximately 12 months after starting the multifamily. That is subject to market conditions. So we will be looking for flexibility for potential phasing, but we do kind of anticipate that there will be 2 separate construction timelines. Thank you, and apologize for not taking 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. That was a lot of information. Great. More presentation. Thank you. So the discussion is now with the SPRC. I'd like to see first if there are any questions to the project updates.
I have one question.
Yeah, Kate.
The 4 extra trees we're bringing in the path around Crystal Flats. Do you know what they are?
Crepe myrtles.
That's what I thought. They look suspiciously like crepe myrtles. Okay, thank you.
Crepe myrtles are not native.
Correct.
No, I don't see that as.
Okay. Chris?
Joan, is it the aerial access road has to get within 30 feet of the building face thing that the fire marshal is
Yes.
struggling with? Okay.
Can you clarify for me, so what's the overall parking ratio going to be? I was a little confused with all the numbers. You're going to keep it what it is?
So the resulting ratios
Yeah.
generally end up being a 0.8
Oh, okay.
for the existing building and
Yeah.
a 0.3 for the proposed building.
Any other questions on the project updates from anyone? Yeah.
I don't really understand all your changes to the pedestrian passageway. I'm very thrilled that you figured something out. One of my first questions after your review, is it possible when you come out to 18th, can you use the sidewalk on the other side? Isn't there a sidewalk on the other side of that driveway?
There's not a sidewalk on the other side. We looked at that
Oh, we're in the street and we were doing the tour, I guess.
to try and jump across the driveway and then get to a sidewalk. And that sidewalk doesn't really, it bends away. So there's currently a path that can access through to that south garage exit, but there isn't a sidewalk coming out. That was my first thought as well.
We need to figure out something on that side.
Correct.
You partially explained why you have this retaining wall.
Yes.
And so when I'm starting to go down the path from east to west, I'm initially lower than the wall, and then when it ramps up, I'll be of the same height as the wall.
So as you step off of each street,
Yeah.
both will be at the same elevation.
Okay.
The retail will continue at an elevation consistent with the sidewalk elevation of ease. But in order to make up the 6.5 feet between each street and the location adjacent to the loading dock on the west side of Crystal Flats, we'll start to have the ramp go up. So this will stay flat and this will go up.
And at some point, I'm at the height of the wall, or close to the height of the wall?
So we'll need to incorporate a handrail detail so that both to separate the retail dining from.
Yeah, and the design of the wall is a specific doing the retaining wall? I mean, it's taking up a huge amount of space. You're creating a really large cafe zone there, and it looks like it's a really narrow pinch point for the walkway.
I think at that point, the walkway is probably at least 8 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This looked to me like it was the space that we lost and built. In other words, that the alleyway or whatever you call it is roughly the same that you had at a walkway ramp. But
Yeah,
the
to some
building-
degree,
But
yeah.
the building footprint
The building moved
makes
away.
up for it.
Yeah.
Correct.
And one clarification on that when Robert's talking about ramping. Ramping technically is over 5%.
Yes.
This is less than
5%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it like 4%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very impressed that you figured this out. I'm not sure I totally understand that. One other comment question, you have, if I'm understanding the slide right, you have a dog peeing area and then an area with fun kind of chairs. And is there a barrier between them?
There's not, it's not intended to be like a dog park or anything like that, but, you know, everyone that
Yeah, but
has
if you
the,
have dogs peeing,
So
you
they're
don't,
Japanese
Yeah.
things.
you don't want it anywhere close to kids.
yeah, oh, yeah.
Or adults.
Yes. Yeah, well,
So, I mean, I agree you need both,
yeah.
but figure out how to keep them
Okay.
separate.
Yeah.
Yep.
Otherwise you'll have kids doing.
Certainly, yeah. Yeah, this is an attempt to, we all recognize dogs coming out of the building, where they go, and
Yeah.
so we're trying to be proactive with that.
No, that's absolutely wonderful
Yeah.
that you're doing that. What are your plans for this very large cafe? Which is, I counted, it was X number of tables, it was 96 seats, which is a lot of seats for a cafe area. What are you going to do out of season, which is a large chunk of the year?
I think we'll need to work, again, we don't have the retailer identified,
Right.
but we do think that having these large outdoor areas will be a way to incentivize a retailer to come here, given that this will be a little bit of a unique offering. So in terms of the specific kind of operations and how it works, I don't know that we have that fully figured out, but we can go and think through and see what we might be able to do and talk to some potential tenants to see how they might handle it, whether it would be 3 season or whether they would build temporary enclosures. I know that tenants have gotten very creative given the need to have outdoor dining during COVID, and now they've been able to work through a lot of those kind of operational learnings into how to better utilize outdoor space permanently.
And what my final comment is, we had a pedestrian passage, and now a large chunk of it is not publicly.
I think that the amount of passageway relative to outdoor seating is relatively the same from the previous concept.
Managed very differently. Yeah.
Okay, understood.
Thanks. I just want to follow up on this, and I think, Pam, maybe you're okay with it, but I just want to clarify this. Since we don't know what the retail is, something that's come up in some of our more recent site plans is making sure there's adequate pickup and drop off for people who are accessing the retail. So please keep that in mind with whatever retail you settle on. Anything else on the updates?
One question. Do you by any chance have a breakdown of the 116 trees that you're going to be planting?
Hey, we're gonna get to open space and.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm curious as well. Okay. All right, let's move into transportation. That's next on our agenda. And I just want to reiterate some of the things that came up at the last meeting. So feel free to build on those or have your own issues and we can go around. The idea of pedestrian crossway through the site, green paths, the, I don't know where the discussion is on access to the underground across the street. I know that's come up as well. The desire lines across the site, the direct entrance to the alley, and the whole issue of it being a super block. So these are just the things that I got from my last notes from the last meeting. But Chris, do you want to start?
I mean, my main question is one of the things you just mentioned, which is, has there been any movement on the possibility of a mid-block crossing across?
In the meantime, is the parking fungible? Because you noted the lofts as potential parking sites, so anybody can park.
So through an existing agreement with lofts,
Yeah.
a portion of the parking in the underground garage underneath Loft 590 is allocated to support Crystal Towers.
Okay. And flats?
But there's,
Flats is separate.
Judy, go ahead.
So there's.
no, I was just saying that the garage parking is the same.
Yes.
I drove around here and I found it
And
very confusing.
And when there was, I've been there
Yeah.
a long time, so I lived through part of the garage rehab, the first part. And I was moved to a loft space, but I was an assigned space. I had to use that space and then move back. Anybody who doesn't pay to park in the garage had to just park is free for all.
Excellent. Well, we'll take that up next. That was one of my questions. Okay, to Chris's question about mid-block crossing needs.
So I just wanted to pull this up, so if folks are like me and more visual people, we have something at the same time. But anyways, the long and the short of it is we did look at this, and it's not something from a county staff perspective we are comfortable introducing because of the existing entrance and exit points for the Marriott on the east side and the driveway on the west side with the Crystal Towers. Introducing some sort of mid-block there was creating a lot of challenges and safety concerns from our staff perspective with all the vehicles turning into and exiting that area. So it's not something we support.
Are we talking about the kind of things on Crystal Drive? I mean, the kind of crossing?
Any type of crossing.
Because
we're not supportive of any type of crossing.
And it's very dangerous.
And it's not something that we want to encourage, which is why we're not supportive of the mid-block crossing in that location.
But it's a huge big block.
It is. It is.
You go really out of your way.
It is a big block.
And it's a huge volume. They just run.
Residents do all. It's very scary.
It's not something we believe is a safe movement, which is why we do not want to introduce the mid-block crossing in that location.
It's unsafe now, unfortunately.
I see Ben, okay. Yeah, Ben has his hands up. Ben?
Yeah, I think you're just talking about this concept, right? I may have other comments later, I do, but can you clarify for the mid-block crossing, what did you analyze? Just a crosswalk, a hawk sign, traffic light? Like, what are the kind of different potential options that you consider?
We were basically looking at the pedestrian patterns and where folks would be. I mean, the reality is with those entrances and exits, any sort of crossing does introduce those conflict points. And that is not something we are supportive of. When we look at this block, you look at the north end at 15th Street, you have a crossing at 15th Street, the south end at 18th Street, there's a crossing as well. So it's not something that we want to encourage or introduce at this time.
I'll just say it's too bad, particularly because of the way that the Route 1 design is going, that we were really hoping to see some progress on that. This would be a major way to encourage people to use the underground and be able to bypass eventually an at-grade Route 1. And a lot of people who live on that site, I'd really encourage doing all we can, even if it needs some, pretty significant investments to identify and invest in a mid-block crossing there. I think that's pretty important from the neighborhood point of view.
Thank you. I've noted this. Okay, so more on that? We're still on transportation, Judy. Go ahead.
Well, I will give my whole spiel that I give all the time about the garage.
Yes.
Concentrating entrance and exit all in one spot on the south. I think living there and using it all the time may look okay on paper, but it's very hazardous. And there's already a loading dock there, and this new building will add a second loading dock, both of which use just that 18th Street curb cut, which is now going to be only one way in and out. And the space is very tight, so there is landscaped area now that can be removed to help that pathway. But there's also serious topographical challenge from the driveway that's there now to the street and sidewalk. So it's a really tight thing, and trying to get people to safely go in and out while they're negotiating a loading dock with trucks all day long. Theoretically, they can go out the garage, depending on how it's controlled and striped, and go all the way through the property and out to Fern. But you go under a building, which is a very low ceiling.
Yeah.
So there are going to be plenty of vehicles that can't do that, even if they thought it was a good way to skirt it. So it's just by having, if there wasn't a retail building, they could at least maintain a safety valve by maintaining the north exit. So you'd still have congestion on the south exit, but now you've got in, out, only in one spot, in a very congested spot. And I think it's going to be very dangerous. I don't see how it's actually going to work. I remain hopeful, so as long as I'm happy to actually use it. But I think it's unfortunate. We tried very hard to at least retain the north exit. And
That's
I
the
guess
one Eads.
no, it's the one that it's a north. Right now, you go in off Eads and you can go out, south, or north.
Okay.
But the north now goes into what is now surface parking, but all of which will go away with the retail and still another loading dock. So now you're going to have 2 loading docks at the north and 2 at the south. So I remain. It's just I don't see how it's going to work. I think it's going to be dangerous.
I look at this site and I'm puzzled in the 21st century why we have circulation all around the outside of the site, Eads, 18th Fern, and then all on the inside of the site as well. And then to hear that it's still dangerous, I wonder if we can do better. Are there any other thoughts on this? I know, Judy, you live there, so I really appreciate hearing this. I drove the site trying to figure it out. Mr. Dowell?
Yes, I think Ben and you folks are asking the right questions. That mid-block crossing is something that it would be good to look at that again really hard, because the Crystal City Sector Plan has a policy that really talks specifically to getting pedestrian routes through these big urban blocks, and the super block there is considerable. We're missing 2 roads. And so I think there's a good question there, because it looks like it's a lot of fun to be a car in that super block, but not great to be a pedestrian. I did have a specific question. If you go back to the pedestrian paths slide, are those pedestrian ways, are they going to be publicly available, or are people coming into the site going to see a lot of no trespassing signs, which is kind of the default in this area?
Yeah.
So we don't anticipate putting up any no trespassing. It's not currently being proposed as an area for county easement, but it will be open to the public.
Okay, so that's a really big point, because I know you're trying hard to meet the intent of the Crystal City Sector Plan, but that pedestrian access through these super blocks, and that's a big super block, is really important. And I know the shape of that original structure can make it difficult, but I really would like to make sure that is not something that escapes. I would really like those, to meet the intent of the sector plan, for those pedestrian routes to be available to the public, with, in the full sense of it, with no new trespassing signs or long lists of rules. Just make it so the public can walk through. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
I just want to kind of second what Mr. Dowell was saying here. I would really like to see a public access easement on anything we're thinking of as a public pathway. We've seen on far too many other site plans where when we don't get that public access easement, there's one cranky resident who decides that vagrants are walking down the sidewalk and sleeping or something, and that it's unsafe, and all of a sudden that public access goes away, and the county has no recourse if there's not a public access easement. Or maybe there's a way to do it as a site plan condition that's not an easement. But we've had far too many things that we thought in site plan review where public access just disappeared, and been told, as residents, well, they can do that. We don't have a public access easement. There's nothing we can do.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think right now, because of the existing, it's not just that they're existing towers, it's that they're connected in such a way that it's really one ginormous footprint. So the only way and it's all secured. So even if you live there, you can't just open doors and go through any old way. And so the only way people can go through the site from east to west is to follow the pavement. So walk with the cars around this way, that's still going to be an option, because those pathways are going to remain, but they're going to be streets essentially. I can't see how, living there, I can't see how you would connect through the block, because the buildings are impervious.
I have a question about the parking. So since the overall parking on this site that you've documented over the last couple of years, the usage ratio is about just like 0.8 or slightly less, but you're proposing to have 0.3 for the new development. How is that going to work out? Do some people pay for parking and it's reserved, and the rest just find what's available?
Everyone pays.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that we would have a certain number of spaces, allocated towards the new development, and then, if they ran out of permits, then we would not provide. So we have wanted to make sure that we are ensuring sufficient parking supply in order to meet in-place demand for the existing residents. And so we feel that we have been able to strike that balance with the number of spaces that we're taking away relative to the number of spaces that are being preserved for the existing building, then providing parking at a more aggressive ratio, right? But that would be available for the new tower.
So the idea is anyone can elect to purchase a parking space.
Yes.
And then when they're gone, they're gone. Do some people buy two, or is it one per unit?
It would be depending on how much supply we have. That if we started to have if we started to have less demand, then we would offer up a second space.
Understood. Okay.
Right.
That's helpful. Yeah. Jim and Ben have had their hands up. So Jim, then tell me, and then Ben.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Yeah, I just want to join the discussion on the mid-block crossing and the circulation internal to the site. And I want to align myself with the other commenters. Certainly, these are very long blocks. If there's any way we could have mid-block crossings, I'm definitely in support of that. To say, well, that's where the driveways come out, so it's dangerous. Well, a street comes out, it's dangerous. And we have crossings at every corner. So I'm not sure that really works for me as a reason not to have a mid-block crossing. Having signalizing it, if we have to do that, we do that. But other than that, we have lots of streets coming into intersections that don't have street lights. I mean, street signals, but we do have crossings. So, a mid-road, the desire is going to be there. People are going to be doing it. I think it's safer if we make it official rather than just let people be crossing wherever they want to cross, because they don't want to walk all the way to the end of the block, which is a really long block. As far as the internal circulation, we had a discussion like this when we were having the SPRCs for Crystal Houses just south of this site. And one of the things I think, if I remember, we came up with was we had those internal circulation streets be more like streets. They have sidewalks. When we were still looking for parking, we would allow parking, but it would have to be parallel. Would have to be parallel parking, not head-in parking. So it read like a street, so that there would be that circulation through the Crystal Houses site. And I think it came out pretty much that way, that there are sidewalks, should it get built, but there would be sidewalks along those internal circulation streets. They do read like streets. If we had something like that here too, that it isn't just for cars cutting through, that it really is something that people would want to walk on, and it's obvious where they would walk on it. They don't have to feel nervous about it. So, we could look to other sites where we have similar issues and use that as instructive. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben DeFonso, then Sarah, then Joe McIntyre.
I was going to actually say the same thing as Commissioner LaTelmy about Crystal House, except to say it more in the framing of, and it's going to connect our two issues today. It'd be really, and I've encouraged the applicant to do this more informally. We have so much on-site parking and so much street parking, and I think we really need to undo the tower in the park, or this is really the tower in the parking lot style building we have, and there's so much surface parking that could really be turned into streets, into trees, into greenery. So it would really encourage, because especially we're losing so many mature trees, getting to the next topic, but I'm framing it as a parking issue. We should really try, this is going to be probably our last opportunity. I don't think there's going to be future building on this site to get rid of some of these really, the surface parking that does not match the character of the neighborhood in the direction we're going. I did want to say I appreciate the improved pedestrian circulation and the connection now between the pedestrian area. Although I do hope that it's really well lit, right? Especially if you have a building on one side and a retention wall on the other with the seating above it, particularly when you don't have that restaurant being used, that area could become a little unsafe feeling, dark, unless you have it really well lit. So I'd encourage the applicant to think about what kind of lighting elements they could do to make that sort of a safe, welcoming area.
Thanks, Ben. Sarah?
I wanted to pull the thread a little bit more on the number of parking spaces allocated per unit. So the building that's currently on the site, I guess that's the lofts, are those residents allowed to purchase more than one parking space?
So currently they are.
Yes. Okay, currently they are, but some portion of the space in that are going to be allocated to the new tower.
So currently there are 931 spaces.
Okay.
Or 912 units.
Okay.
That looking at utilization over the past several years,
Yeah.
not all of those spaces are being utilized.
Okay.
So utilization over the past several years varied, let's say between 0.75.
Okay.
And so one of the goals of the project from the kind of inception
Mhm.
was to ensure that we were preserving sufficient parking to meet in place demand.
Okay, the existing residents. Okay. So with the new tower, the thinking is that we'll see where demand is, and then potentially some units would have the opportunity to purchase a second parking pass, but it's not guaranteed.
Correct.
Will there be an impact on the existing units in the loft building? Would they also find their ability to have a second parking space go away? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, so on the site, you have Lost 590, which has their own parking.
Yeah.
We do not own Lost 590.
Got it, okay.
And so they have their own parking. That Crystal Towers has spots within Loft's garage
Then, okay.
where our residents can park.
Okay, so the arrangement is simply with use of the garage spaces, it's not, okay. So, okay, that I think answers my question, which was next. You could end up with different, Lost 590 could have one system, and, they could allow residents to purchase multiple passes per unit, and that would not necessarily mean whatever decision you guys make with multiple passes per unit, because it's different ownership, and would be no synchronization of that.
Totally different ownership between Lost 590 and Crystal Towers.
Okay.
So they're operated as separate garages, housed within the same physical facility.
Okay, and the arrangement is simply that you have a certain number of spaces.
That's correct.
Okay. And then I will also add my support for the mid-block crossing. If people are already doing it in a highly unsafe manner, and we know human behavior is doing that, it seems silly to ignore that people are doing that in an unsafe manner. I understand that this may not be a highly desirable activity that we to encourage, but we should at least make it safe. People are doing it anyway. Like, we got to figure out a way to make it safer for them.
Joan? Mr. Byrne, would you turn your camera off, please?
Yeah, just kind of adding on to the thoughts about the internal pedestrian flow and parking is to maybe think long-term about how hopefully and maybe even encouraging residents to kind of reduce ownership and kind of designing things so that one can pave the way to expand that internal flow with, again, adding more open space as well. And maybe even thinking about things like supporting car share arrangements and other types of options that would make it more appealing, or at least provide some incentives for people to not own their own car if they know they would have access to a car when they need it.
Thank you. Okay, do we have anything else on transportation, or should we move on to open space landscaping? Pam?
A couple of things. Okay, so we all know we really want this crosswalk on Eads, and is one on 18th Street also out of the question? Crossing mid-block 18th?
Yes, that is not something we are looking at.
Okay, again, it's not the same volume, but a lot of people, I don't even know who they are, why they're crossing, but there's a lot of people that my final question at the moment is about Kudo, and what are you all doing to solve the double parking and Kudo problem in Fletcher Flats? And obviously, why do you have any parking there? I mean, there's such a high demand for Kudo parking there. Why isn't it just Kudo parking? There's a constant flow of vehicles for dropping off people, picking up people, dropping off stuff. It's nonstop, and to have people park there, and they legitimately park there, why? And where, and especially if you're picking somebody up, they want to be dropped off there. They don't want to be dropped off internal to the Crystal Tower site. The door, the entranceway is right there. So can we fix that? It's a major problem. It's going to be even worse when you put the median back. It's going to really tighten up the space. I'm thrilled that you're putting the median back. I think that's good. I miss the median a lot. Except you're going to get a lot more people, a lot more U-turns there, because people have to, one way have to go around. And you're going to get people driving the wrong way, which happens so often when you have median.
I need some clarification about what frontage you're talking about.
Talking about
This is the Crystal Towers, so you're talking about not Crystal Towers frontage?
Yeah, Crystal Flats which is also WEC.
Yes.
Yeah, the first.
On East Street or 18th Street?
18th. This is 18th Street. That's the problem. There is parking, legitimate paid parking, right in front of that building for that block, and why?
It might be better used as like a
Could be
drop
better
especially
for
if fresh development coming in, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's something the owner, Robert, can request the county to look at changing the use. I mean, it's the county right away, so we control how the spaces are managed. So unless someone comes to us and says we'd like to change it, we don't have the resources or time, quite frankly, to drive around and just.
I'm asking Robert to ask you.
I can submit that.
That's totally independent of the site plan.
I will look into this and I will talk to the county.
Okay, but
I think the other thing though, would you mind pulling up that 18th Street slide? I wanted to look and see how much parking we have going back there, because part of the 18th Street Complete Street project is introducing that protected bicycle facility on that north and south side. So there actually isn't going to be any parking along the 18th Street frontage. So Robert can ask us.
So don't do that.
No. We will ask about the East Street frontage, that there is paid parking. And we have heard that there is the double parking issue. So I certainly think that that's something that we could talk to staff about and see if we can get that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah, so when they redesign East, since they are going to be doing some changes all the way down to 18th, you all can look at requesting having those spaces, and even along your frontage of that retail building, if there's spaces there that you want to have, like a 15-minute passenger pickup and drop off or something, that's something we can work out with you, but that is outside of the site plan and is a space management issue.
That's going to be the no parking zone. Fire truck access.
Well, I just meant in front of the retail building, so further north,
Yeah,
like
okay.
towards
Yes.
16.
Yes.
So not just the Crystal Flats frontage.
Yep.
You have that opportunity to ask for it along all of Eads if there's certain areas you think make the most sense. Because I think to your point exactly.
Once you get beyond the driveway, it's not a problem. It's just right in front of it.
Right, but with the introduction of the retail building,
Yeah.
I could see folks, especially wanting to go to that retail building, depending on what retail is there, I could see folks wanting to utilize that area as opposed to go into the site and use the parking on site, especially if they're just running in to get
This
something.
is my point from earlier as well. Thank you. Thanks, Joanne, for suggesting that, moving this along. Great idea.
Yeah. Especially if you do create your passageway all the way through and create a sidewalk, and you might need to remove some of that parking, then you're really going to need some of that parking. The rest of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for pursuing that as part of this. We understand that it is not. Jim, last question on transportation?
Yeah, it's charging. You said you're going to be looking into having more charging stalls in the parking garage. So yeah, the more you can do, the better, because really there are going to be more and more electric cars. All manufacturers are going that way. So it's going to be in the interest of your tenants. The other thing is, in your bike room, you're going to have charging ability, because electric bikes are really growing. I don't think you want them to be charged up in the apartments, and I don't think people want to do that. So the bike room is going to have some sort of ability for people to be able to safely charge their bikes and lock them up. because they're getting really expensive. Those are my only comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Have you already considered that?
We are talking about it
Okay, good.
for how to accommodate that, not only within the proposed building, within our existing.
Joan, last question on transportation.
Yeah, just second the thought about the electrification, and might also want to look at some of the surface parking and opportunities for making sure or installing charging net stations there as well to accommodate, since much of your parking is the surface lots. And I don't know whether to what extent it might work to have charging with solar panels. Actually a little bit of shading, and of course fewer parking spaces overall. But again, the thinking about going towards electric vehicles.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to open space and landscaping in a moment. Prepare your questions. Here's my summary, what I heard on transportation. Very, very strong support for mid-block crossing on Eads. We understand where the county's coming from with it, but the reality is people are fallible and they're already crossing there. The idea of making the pedestrian paths through the site available, no trespassing signs, preference for public access easements for this. Looking at pickup drop-off opportunities, especially on Eads since 18th is no longer an issue, and exploring more charging opportunities both for the bikes and the cars, including some that are on site where you don't have to access the garage. Sounds good? Okay, good. All right, moving on to open space and landscaping. Kate, would you like to start?
Awesome. Thank you. Do you know, out of the 116 trees that you're planning on planting, how many, do you have a count of how many are canopy trees and how many are understory trees?
So the shade and large evergreen trees is 44.
Okay.
And then the ornamental and small evergreen trees are 56.
How does that compare with what's being pulled down? I mean, are you replacing canopy trees, or do you have more canopy? My big concern is canopy trees.
Yeah, I don't have the breakdown for canopy versus ornamental, but I do have it on at a caliper size.
Okay.
So like 3 to 10 inch caliper was 49 trees, 3 of which, and this is removed, 3 of which were poor health. And then greater than 10 inch caliper was 26, 1 of which was poor health.
Okay, okay. I would just encourage, as I'm subbing for this one, so I'm trying to get up to speed, but as many canopy trees as can help, be healthy and grow there is important. I mean, it's the ornamental trees are great. I'm not knocking them, but they don't provide the kind of environmental benefits and the cooling and everything else that the canopy trees do. And to work with the county and make sure that the planting boxes are as up to speed and as big and functioning to the there's been a lot of great things that have been happening with those. So you might as well get the best that we've got available right now to make sure those trees are healthy. I just want to say I love the green roofs. I think they're fantastic. I love the solar that you're actually doing it on on site. I think that's really great. And and I didn't really understand, you just kind of mentioned it with the deep green roof that will somehow kind of merge with the canopy or what have you. I don't know, did you have some kind of plan with that, or did I just mishear that?
Yeah, I think you want to take it over.
Yeah, so we have tried to differentiate the types of green roofs that we would be installing.
Right.
So on tops of the building, we would be doing extensive green roof, but we do have this identified portion of intensive green roof that would allow us to get sufficient soil depth in order to have real plants, right?
Right, right.
And so that would be located, if you have been to Crystal Towers, that we are proposing to structurally strengthen the existing lobby.
Okay.
And then have that section on top of the existing lobby that connects into the proposed building be intensive green roof.
Okay.
And so taking the sustainability improvements that we are trying to incorporate into the development, also bleeding them into the.
That's great. one last thing. Are you using bird-friendly glass?
We are,
especially around the trees and
so we're proposing to comply. So the bird-friendly glass between 8 and 6 feet is a prerequisite for the Green Building Incentive Program, and we intend to comply with that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Just to follow up on some of this. So the most recent research on the bird-friendly glasses, if you're going to be developing that intensive green roof, you're going to need to have bird-friendly glass around that as well. What we're finding is people put in all this effort to put in the plantings, but the birds are going to fly into the glass because you've just attracted them there. So I'm not sure that's an issue with your green roof. With regard to the canopy, I understand the conversations that we're having with trees removed, trees being replaced, but the reality is we're losing a lot of canopy. And we're not replacing canopy, we're planting trees. They're not going to be adding much canopy to this. Do you have anything that you can say to hearten us and make us feel like it isn't awful that we're losing these enormous big trees?
I mean, I think that when the trees were originally planted, and
I understand, but that was what? Those are 60, 80-year-old trees. I'm not an arborist, but they're really old. Okay, so here's the other thing. You know, when we brought forth this biophilia initiative a few years ago, it was in part because there are literally thousands of scholarly and popular papers that document the positive relationship people get from regular access to nature. But it was also to get us, yes, we do want canopy for a lot of really good reasons, but sometimes you can't get all the trees on the site. But we're getting a lot of the same benefits from native shrubs that help with erosion control and air cleaning. I know I broached this with you in a prep meeting, the idea of maybe planting the areas around the parking more intensively with shrubs and perennials as well as your trees. Because you wouldn't have to wait 60 years to see that. You would get some of that benefit immediately for the neighbors, the folks walking around the site, in a way that you're not going to be able to replace the trees canopy-wise. So I want to throw that out there. I don't know if there's any appetite among this group for something like that. I don't want to speak for you. I know that your plan says you want more open space. The last dozen SPRCs I chaired co-chaired said you want more open space, more greenery. I want to throw that out to you. Also, the branding that is associated with that sort of planting is good for buildings. So I'm just saying that. Joan, you have your hand up? Joan.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions on the bird-friendly glass. What did you have actually estimate or number for what the bird collision threat factor was on that? And whether that, we kind of look for achieving 15 or below?
We don't have that at this time. So we can certainly come back and follow up with that information. But we will be meeting the requirements of the prerequisite in the incentive program.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what the GBI requires in terms of and how it relates to that number, but kind of looking at I think coming from the Audubon Society and other groups that look at that's kind of considered the gold standard of bird-friendly glasses is achieving those numbers below 15 on how they calculate it. On the question, you encourage that you're doing solar on the one building, but it also actually looks like there might be even more room for putting solar on other parts of that roof. And whether we're considering that as just a way of boosting the amount of renewable energy that's produced on the site for the whole complex.
Yeah, I mean, I can say that we have looked at solar to see what the potential would be. That what this building or what this project is committing to is up to a 65 kilowatt array. Or sorry, at least a 65 kilowatt array.
Yeah. No, and I think that's more than what's required in the GBI, so that's good. But again, looking at the opportunities on the roof of the whole building that you're utilizing indicates there are other opportunities for even more solar.
And Commissioner Guerin, to go back to a comment that you had, we will go back and look at more intensive planting opportunities around the existing parking.
I would appreciate that. This is a trend we have. And I know you and your colleagues, you've been working in this community for a while. We're adding a lot of people to this community, and we don't really have the ability to add a lot of open space. So I think we have to do a really good job with the space that we have. And you do have that space there. You're not gonna plant on those little hills that go from the parking lot up to the sidewalk. You're not gonna do anything other than plant something there. You're not gonna build anything there. You don't have trees there now, so if you're gonna add trees, this is the time to add all the other plantings and not disturb the roots. I just feel like you have an opportunity. And I think it might go a long way. I saw it was done with the tree pits on one of the JBG properties where they added not just the trees, but the shrubs and the perennials. It looks really nice. It's a little mini habitat. We're not replacing anything. We're not really, but it looks nicer. The big pots with the multiple plants growing in them.
Right. Right now, if you look at the existing building, going in both directions, towers, planting is really a lot of shrubs and a lot of ornament, very rich looking. My understanding is that all that's going to be, which is really unfortunate. But to reinforce your point, I used to look out and top of one of the trees.
I remember that.
In one of my apartments,
Uh-huh.
Which was awesome. And I'm sure that big tree, well, it shouldn't have to go because it's not anywhere near the construction. But anyway, but I do think that if that can't be preserved, then that level of multi-layered, not necessarily canopy, because it certainly won't happen in my lifetime, but I think the notion of trying to make a richer environment for the pedestrian is really important.
And it's very biophilic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ben, then Michael.
Yeah, I share just everyone's sentiments about the loss of trees. I think we're just really being screwed over here by ancestors and bad planning that was allowed that led to these, really great trees. We really rue the decisions that were made many years ago. And I really hope we can find some more trees and more biophilia. Why not put green roofs on the existing? It's not quite biophilia, but more green roofs on the existing buildings and things like that. Are we talking about the new open space or the refined open space as well? Is that part of this section?
Yes.
I'm kind of confused by what's happening there, about if there's really an addition. It sort of looks like we're losing green space in some ways if we're getting some more pavement and for where seats are going. And can someone walk through a little bit more about what the proposed pocket park is going to be like compared to the current, like where we are losing plantings or gaining plantings, compared to patio seating and basically de facto seating serving retail, which is nice, but it's a benefit for the retail clients of the property owners as much as anyone else in terms of public space. So that would be helpful and appreciated.
So here you can see the existing condition on the left and then the proposed on the right. This was really a concept put forth based on conversations with staff to try and provide a little bit more structure, purpose to the pocket park. That as a part of the baseline, we are expanding the easement area by 700 square feet. But to the extent that there are comments on the nature of these enhancements, we're certainly open to them. We do want to provide access back in between the buildings because that is how people going to the lost parking lot, come around the building if they were coming off of each street. So that was an important component. Adding in some outdoor seating felt like a way to provide a little bit of definition and purpose rather than just being purely circulation. And then we have taken some of the pathways away and infilled it with green space in an attempt to, again, try and green up that corner as we can.
So can you clarify the picture on the left, there's trees and plantings on the left side. Is that, and then it sort of gets replaced by what looks like new to part of the retail development? Is that currently not on the left side of the left picture, not part of the current easement?
That is not part of the current easement.
So we are sort of like the debate about, we're losing green space but gaining public space, which sort of is frustrating from like a neighborhood and a realized experience point of view, like, right, and we've talked about this for other developments, but really from neighborhood point of view, from a user, there's no, you don't see the space as differentiated by who owns it. It's where the trees are and how you can use it. And we are effectively losing, trees and plantings in that park, which I think is really unfortunate. It is sort of the way it is. I do think that an alternative to tables and plantings might be like enhanced green space, maybe like some interesting ways of thinking through sculptural seating with green space interspersed and plantings interspersed, rather than your just kind of typical tables and chairs that'll be used by, retail people and end up with food discarded, but sort of like maybe like a little mini refuge sort of thing where you can sit and relax, but not necessarily eat. So that's something to throw out to consider. But it is a little bit frustrating the way it's working out.
And one additional comment I want to make about the proposed enhancements is that we really restricted them to being on our portion of the property.
Yep.
So given the property line runs through and then goes at an angle up through. And so we are restricted, or we want to be restricted to just proposing the enhancements on our portion of the property, rather than going and proposing improvements on somebody else's property, because we're trying to be good neighbors. So that was one of the restrictions that we had in thinking through how the proposed enhancements might be.
All right, thank you. Michael Dowell?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to add to the other voices suggesting more commitment to the tree canopy. I think if we're going to pick up on some suggestions like Mr. Lintelmi made about the sidewalks along the interior road system, we could look at the improving the landscaping overall. We've seen in other site plans, the developers have repeatedly told us that when you have the equipment on site and you're building, say, this pocket park, that's the point at which refreshing the landscaping through the whole area will never be any less expensive, because you have that equipment on site already. And I'm really attentive. I mean, I really like the idea that we're preserving these structures, but what comes with that is the likelihood with this significant investment that this is the only chance to align things to the sector plan for over the 40 years of the plan. So really encourage the applicant to think through how to get better alignment, especially with the biophilia and the pedestrian porosity. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Two questions and a comment. Your intensive roof, I thought I heard earlier that there were two of them, or is it just the one?
It's really just the one area.
Okay. I wasn't sure where the second one would be. And then my other question is about the open space. My comment is that yes, the people in lofts use that, but those of us who live in the neighborhood, that is a passageway for us. That is the only current use of the neighborhood. It's not a direct line, but it's a line and it keeps us off the. Yes, please, I'm glad you preserved it. My question is about, is it with a boardwalk? Understand why you have a boardwalk there in the town. Can we do something greener?
Yeah, sure. And boardwalk, we probably maybe jumped a little bit ahead in saying that material, but the idea is there's a large willow oak tree in the middle there that has a large critical root zone, and part of the area that we're showing some of the seating that is within that critical root zone. So we don't want to do any sort of traditional pavements, that you're digging into the root zone. So maybe it's not boardwalk quite the way that would be conducive here, coming flush off a sidewalk. But there's other things like flexi pave and things like that that could be done in a critical root zone that pedestrians can move across.
Well, you've got lots of pathways. I think what we're asking for is more green.
Sure,
And wonderful that you're preserving this tree
Mhm.
and protecting it. Yeah, if you could just put more green around it, I'm not sure that we really need.
Sure, yeah, and we.
Some simple kind of natural
Yeah.
seating.
Yep. Yeah, I was just gonna say, there's that north sidewalk that's being removed. I think that's one of the areas we're talking about adding green back. The other thing I'd add is at the corner, the very corner of 15th and Eads, that's where you're gonna get the most sun. So that's where we're not putting trees in. We wanna make sure we have space for pollinator garden and biophilia, which is there as well.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So what I've heard on this is, and I want to be a little bit clear, I didn't specify a lot of what we talked about for the pedestrian paths and moving through the site, but that included considering parallel parking and having the sidewalks read like the streets, adding more greenery, making sure they're well lit, especially the areas that might not be actively used throughout the year, and incentivizing sort of some reduced auto use on site. Here, what I've heard, since it's a bit related, is considering adding the plantings in the layers. I said that, so. Joan would like to know the threat factor on the glass, probably at the time that goes to a hearing. And with this new open space, consider more green refuge and less seating. And then we started to move into, I think, sustainability, community benefits. And Joan had asked her question about adding more solar on the roof, and I think others supported that. So are there more comments on the sustainability and community benefits? That's the third item on the agenda. Judy?
No, this is the last SPRC.
This is our last SPRC, and then we'll have the public hearing at PC and then the board.
Well, this is the recurring and perennial issue of community benefits, which are almost always the usual suspects. Transportation, which benefits the county, but doesn't necessarily benefit the community. Affordable housing, which is absolutely necessary. But I would refer staff and applicants to livability document, which documents a lot of things which the community actually thinks would be community benefits. One of the frustrations for all of us is that by the time we always hear that they're in negotiation, and by the time they make it to the staff report for planning commission, there's absolutely no opportunity for the community to participate. So I think that's a structural problem with all site plans, but I just wanted to, speak up once again on behalf of the community that says, don't call it community benefits unless they really are. And you have spoken to the community and you looked at the documents that we've produced through the years that actually talk about our community in which this project is located. So that's
a great point, and I used to be much better at going through that in advance of meetings and reminding, you can look through this if they want a neighborhood hardware store. It's very specific, and some things have been checked off in the last few years, but some are still outstanding.
And are we going to wrap around at the end?
We can certainly do that. Is there more on open sustainability and community benefits on the table? If not, there's a couple hands up. Okay. Joan and then Ben.
Yeah, couple of questions. First, you mentioned a 20% energy efficiency gains from ASHRAE baseline. I thought the earlier material I had looked at said 24% with an 85 score for the Energy Star performance for the building. It want a clarification of what the target is.
So the energy model that we currently have does show the 24% and 85 Energy Star. So I merely mentioned that we were satisfying the 0.25 FAR prerequisite at the 20% above ASHRAE.
Okay, I mean, it's better to highlight the higher score, I think, for community benefits. The other question I have relates to electrification of the building. From what we've gotten, it sounds like that you're going with fossil gas for the HVAC systems for the hot water, both hot water and heating. And the energy model indicates that there was a pathway to an all-electric building that would allow it to be carbon neutral once the energy grid would be powered by renewable energy. So that, is kind of a bit more information as to why you're not going down that path. That also would, if my calculations were right, would be an additional 35% increase in energy efficiency and or 35% reduction in energy use, which are, again, a big savings both for the company operating the building and the tenants living there.
Yes, you are correct. And I responded back with an updated response to RFI from E2C2 earlier this afternoon that included some additional items. But the current system is a water source heat pump with a centralized gas-fired boiler. So some of the obstacles that we ran into thinking about converting the gas-fired boiler to an electric system is overall electrical capacity and the limitations on increasing vault size, given existing utilities and site constraints. Also, the concerns around the space constraints around the rooftop for the additional equipment. We do understand that thinking about into the future, what would a pathway towards all electric potentially be if the technology was to get there. So we are going to be working with the design team to think about items such as reinforcing the structural slab of the roof to accommodate additional equipment in the future, as well as looking at how the systems are interconnected, as well as the riser capacity, so that at a certain point in the future, we could potentially swap out equipment to the extent it was really commercially available.
Are you by chance consulting with people in the building decarbonization network, or those that are do some of the zero carbon building certification to better identify what might be some possible guideline or possible pathways to getting there, preferably with actually with the initial construction rather than locking on fossil gas for a decade or so? And would you be considering maybe geothermal as well?
So given the nature of the project, I think it is highly unlikely that we would be considering geothermal.
Well, actually, there's a number of geothermal installations in Manhattan and New York City, St. Patrick's, but there's others. So they're being done in highly urban environments. So I think it's probably worth checking out.
Okay, we can certainly have the design team check, do another analysis on potential geothermal. And then to the extent the sustainability consultant has not yet reached out to some of those zero carbon certification agencies, we can have that done in the next couple of weeks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Ben?
I'll say on sustainability, I really agree with the earlier comment that you should have more capacity for electric car spaces. On community benefits, I really agree with everything Judy said. It really does a disservice to everyone that we continue to not know what the community benefits are during SPRC. I think that's wrong. I will say on the affordable housing, though, that I think it continues to be a priority that affordable housing be on site. So hopefully we see that as part of this package when we eventually get it is revealed to us what the community benefits are.
Thank you. Michael Dowell?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I agree with Ben and Judy's perspective on the community benefits. Yeah, if we could understand those earlier, it'd be helpful. I did have a question for the applicant regarding like parking. It feels that you have to go with an estimate for now. Are there ways to convert unused parking spaces to open space or gardens? And I'm thinking about how in Alexandria, coming out of the pandemic, you can actually lease parking spaces and turn them into other things. But so we're looking at lots of parking. You have your own best estimates of how they can be used, but inevitably we're going to have empty parking spaces. And I'm just wondering if there's a way to convert that to open space as things, as you settle into your real numbers. Just a question, but I just wondered if you'd thought about that, because it seems like we're all kind of making a forecast and we're going to be sitting there inevitably looking at empty parking spaces.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our standpoint, As I said, a guiding principle when we set out was to ensure that we were maintaining parking to satisfy existing demand, because it felt strange as a building owner to go and talk to residents, as we've done multiple times, and say, not only do you have to live through construction disruption, but we're also taking away your parking. That we wanted to tell people that if you have a parking spot today, you will have a parking spot in the future. You may not have your same parking spot, but we will be able to accommodate your needs on the property. And we felt that, and we heard that there was a preference and support for that kind of approach. In the future, to the extent parking utilization changes or evolves, we will be evaluating whether or not there are alternate or more productive uses for that surface parking. Just having fields of empty asphalt does nobody any good. It certainly doesn't do our property any good. It doesn't enhance the resident experience. So we are committed to maintaining parking for the existing demand today, but we will be continually monitoring it. And if the dynamics change to where we have a tremendous excess of surface parking that is not utilized, then yes, we will certainly be revisiting that to see if we can convert it into something else.
I would just say also that between the retail building and the residential building, a lot of surface parking is going away. So not very many spaces are being built in the new building. It's mostly that you're capturing from somewhere else. So I can see, Mike, that down the road, that might be an option. But I think right now, in the near term, you're not only having to preserve parking for the 900 plus units that are there, but for all another 200, that, and you're going up to 1,100 space units, and you're not adding much in the way of parking. You're taking away more than you're adding. So I think for now, in the near term, you can make the numbers work probably with a certain parking ratio, but I don't think you can convert the pavement, any additional pavement yet, until we see how many people are actually trying to park.
Yep, I agree. Thank you both.
Jim and Tommy?
Yeah, following up on those comments, and this came up at Transportation Commission, so Commissioner Slatt may want to expand on this. But when the site plan is approved at a certain parking ratio, I would advocate that that be the maximum, that if the applicant wants to reduce parking in the future, they do not have to come back for a minor or a major site plan amendment. They can just go ahead and do it. If they want to convert space from parking, let's say, to an additional bike room space, or transformers for additional capacity for recharging vehicles, that sort of thing, that they can just do it. They don't have to come back for an amended site plan. And I think that really follows on very well to what Mr. Dowell was saying. Thank you.
All right, I wasn't going to bring it up because we sprung it on Joanne at Transportation Commission. She hasn't ever.
I'm ready to answer. I was like, Jen's hands up. I know what Jen's going to say. I feel like we just talked about this.
Do you guys want to? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah. Did you want to say anything first?
I was just saying we moved this on Americana actually. With exactly as Mr. Tommy was saying, the idea being, we used to. We have always in the past, if the applicant says this many parking spaces, approval at exactly that ratio, because years ago we were really about them not building enough parking, and so we wanted to make sure they couldn't build any less than they said they were going to. Now that our thinking has shifted, and often you would be not opposed to seeing a lower parking ratio, we think it makes sense to change the county's approach and approve a ratio that is at least somewhat lower than they are proposing. If we would have approved, if they had proposed it a lower number, as he was saying. So if they need additional underground transformers to support more EV parking, and the obvious place to do that is in an existing parking space in the parking garage, they don't have to come back for a reapproval because now the parking ratio is lower. Or they filled the bike room, right? And there's no more space for bikes, but often our bike rooms are in a parking garage and they can just take another parking space. They don't have to come back for it. So this was the thinking of the Transportation Commission. And it's certainly applicable to most of the developments that we are seeing.
Thank you.
So this is a larger topic, obviously, as Chris mentioned and Jim and other folks have mentioned. So the construct of UL to site plans is the developer proposes a ratio, and then staff reviews that. So if the developer proposed a lower ratio, then staff would review a lower ratio. If the developer chose to build more parking, then that would be their up to them if they wanted to do that. So if someone says to me, is this parking ratio appropriate? I'm going to review what is proposed. So typically the developers usually don't propose a lower ratio than what has been built. Just for everyone's information, as I mentioned, the Transportation Commission, there have recently been a couple office projects where they have proposed a lower ratio. It's maybe like 2 or 3% lower. So it's not something crazy where they say, like, we're going to go 0.3 and then build like twice as much parking, just because there has been some flux at that time in the site plan approval that with the office buildings and the transformer vaults that they weren't really sure. So we had a lot of discussions with them about, let's come up with a ratio that makes sense, that we believe kind of builds in that ability to not have to do a site plan amendment because all of a sudden they're short, like 5 spaces or something. Because as staff, that's not something I want to do. And so that's where it comes up to, how does the applicant want to approach this? So if they want to propose a ratio of 0.7, let's say, as opposed to 0.8, that's something that we will go ahead and evaluate. In this area, the residential guidelines do require a minimum of 0.3 spaces per unit for market rate units. They are not proposing any shared parking. I say that just because the Americana we were talking about on Tuesday, they did have a shared parking arrangement. So this is all on-site parking. So that's the long-winded way of saying we review what the applicant proposes. If they want to propose something different, then we will evaluate that in the construct of the proposal in terms of units and the retail and what their program is. So it's up to them to decide how they want to potentially process changes in the future.
Okay. I have a different question for you, Joanne, but about parking. The county's parking pilot project, are the streets surrounding this site part of that? Any of them, all of them, some of them?
So this is within the global area. I couldn't tell you exactly when they're getting to these frontages. I can tell you that we are working to try and minimize any spaces where there are little sensors involved and then all of a sudden it's taken out due to construction. So we are trying to work efficiently to minimize that. But yeah, generally speaking, the on-street parking spaces are within that pilot area.
So that'll be generating some interesting data. That'll be useful for people.
I mean, the reality is though that his project's not going to be built. The pilot's probably going to be over before the project is constructed and occupied. So we could see the utilization today, which will be somewhat helpful. But the future program is a bit different, especially with the introduction of retail, which I think is also going to be the big difference between does there want to be the introduction of those pick up and drop off or like some 30-minute loading zones along the frontage.
Glad we were able to hear that discussion as it evolved. The last item on our agenda is the construction phasing and staging, and I'll just get started on this one. I know it's been brought to my attention by members of the community that I think, given all the construction that's going on in this part of the community, there's a strong desire to really adhere to our plans for temporary sidewalks and street crossings, being concerned about nighttime lighting, and if so, why we have to light the sites at night. Yeah, so I don't know. I'll just kick it off with those.
Well, yeah, I was going to just speak on behalf of myself and all my fellow residents that this project is going to impact literally hundreds of units and many more hundreds of residents, and they're all Dweck folks. So it's not like Crystal Drive where they put up, JBG puts up a couple of towers and they're disassociated from the condo people across the street. Not like that. No street, no separation, no nothing. And just lighting is one of my things. I don't know if it's required. If it's required, it can face the hotel. I don't care. But all of the rest of us, there's one light on the top of the flats. And in my apartment, short of reading, I can do anything in the house just from that one light. And it's not, I assume it's there for some safety sidewalk reason or something. But when I look at new construction where there are these ginormous lights on every single floor, we have to do something about screening that. The other thing is that in keeping with the comment about community benefits coming in at the last minute, we never basically see any site plan conditions on hours and days of operation. And here again, all the Dweck folks who surround these sites are going to be are going to be so impacted and not have any sort of quiet enjoyment. So I understand that time is money, and so every site plan I've ever looked at, that they always want to build every day as long as possible, but there needs to be some balance because this project is so close to so many people. And as I say, they're your people, so, and I don't know what sort of mitigation can come from people who live here, but at least there could be some humanity injected into the hours of operation, which, as I say, we'll only see at the very last minute when it becomes a site plan condition. So we don't have much to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that just being able to come yell at me is actually going to be a tremendous benefit. that rather having it,
your number,
right? I know. I think we have tried to be as proactive as we can about meeting with the residents. And I think on previous projects, we were able to say, not my building, not my problem. We'll go communicate with ownership and rely on ownership to go and talk to the residents, which oftentimes they didn't. So that's why starting over the summer, we organized specific resident meetings because it's a different conversations, a different set of issues. And we plan to continue doing that all the way. That when you think about Dweck, we are a family-owned company, much smaller relative to most of the other property owners. That we can't risk losing the value of Crystal Towers or the value of the new development. There has to be a balance. And so I certainly appreciate the comment. I don't know that I have any solutions. It will be disruptive. My hope is that because there will be common ownership, because there will be common oversight, because I'm going to be responsible for the impacts on towers just as much as the progress of development to the extent we move forward, that will be a tremendous benefit to the residents relative to other situations that have occurred throughout Crystal. And I do know that this type of infill development is very complicated. So all I can say is that I certainly understand and appreciate the impact, and that the ongoing dialogue and communication, my hope is that that will bring better outcomes than has been experienced on other projects.
Yeah, thank you. So we do have construction hours that are in our standard conditions, and they, to my knowledge, have not changed on any project that I worked on. They are consistently pretty standard across those. So it's condition 10B. I can send you the language if you're interested in those hours. They're standard and we don't change them without really.
And to add on to what Courtney's saying, she's exactly correct. A lot of developers previously have come in to ask us for extending their hours, and it is something we are very, Robert may have asked this a couple times before, and he's heard my answer, which is especially,
we're not gonna ask, right?
Especially where there are a lot of residential, we are very concerned about that. And that is why there are very few instances lately that we have agreed to expand in construction hours.
Cranes, everybody's saying. They put those in the middle of the streets and stuff like I'm just saying, there are exceptions for that.
There,
Take your point.
absolutely, there are exceptions. And that is something that, again, whenever they do, you know, like the road closures, they have to go through and they have to get the noise ordinance waivers and they have to get the street closures. So that is a very specific and specialized operation that does occur, and there is a process that the developer has to follow because we don't want to have those impacts to the residents. Especially as you're pointing out, this is a, you know, it's not even across the street, it's, you know, like 5-10 feet away. Okay, not that close,
No,
but
well.
It's way farther away than possible.
You know, it's within that same block, so there's not even, you know, like the entire street width that you're looking at as a buffer. So it is something we as staff are very cognizant of, and we do not support increases to those hours very often or very lightly. The other thing I did want to mention also is we also have a standard site plan condition talking about temporary lighting around the site, and that is specifically for the sidewalks, for the pedestrian paths. That is not related to lighting that perhaps is in the buildings. That's something you can call Robert directly and talk to him about that.
I imagine that it's part of the contractor safety protocol. So I know that we have been, because we are being disruptive by construction on some of our other buildings, we have been coordinating with those other contractors and have been successful at either shielding or shutting off the lighting at night when it's shining right into your window. So I think there's certainly a productive conversation to be had, and I'll go talk to our pre-construction contractor to figure out if it's a legal requirement or what types of flexibility there is.
Don't do Met Park.
Yeah.
Beacon in the whole neighborhood.
So yeah, from a staff perspective, we want to make sure that there is lighting for folks, the public to walk in the area.
Yeah, thank you. The vertical one.
Right, and
It's difficult.
that is not something that is a site plan condition. It is something I believe is more a building safety, more of an ISD issue. So if those are concerns, that's something that needs to be taken up with the building official and Robert, versus something where it's temporary lighting that is something we do require, and they'll have to provide a plan, and then we approach.
All right, thank you. I think we'll have a final comment from Mr. Dowell, then I'll wrap up. Everyone can go around the table once and we'll get public comments. Mr. Dowell?
Actually, I think I'm good. I think that last 2 minutes clarified my question, so thank you.
I'm going to wrap up what I've heard and then we'll go around the table. So everybody, if you have anything else to add. I shared the transportation comments that we got with regard to open space and landscaping. Consider, I said about these, the layering and for sustainability and community benefits. Look at adding more solar on the roof if possible. Consider if you can get geothermal in there. I didn't know that we could do this in those urban settings, so thank you, Joan. And perhaps be prepared to tell us a little bit more about your pathway into going all electric in the future, if that's an option. With regard to community benefits, definitely look at the SPRC plan, livability. Folks have identified the sort of benefits that they'd like to see in this neighborhood, and they're fairly specific. And now with regard to the staging, it sounds like both the applicant and staff really recognize the need for the balance here. And so at the planning commission hearing, perhaps will it be you, Robert? Is it going to be you? If the community has any concerns with this development?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll just be really clear.
Yeah.
Well,
Everybody has my cell phone, right? They can always call me. They can text me.
It's going to be on the publicized meeting.
Yes. Yes.
That's right. With a picture of your face. And this is you. Any problems with this? Yeah. Okay. That's great. Let's go around. Any final comments?
Yeah, and in regards to community benefits and the timing of those conversations, I think it's recurring issues. I think it's and from all angles, we can be away. Really give actionable feedback that's actually heard at a time when everyone wants. That we've got to. All my other comments.
I regret that we didn't have presentations. I think they're really useful.
I like that too, Pam. I'm one of those people who like
I have even more questions.
Or fewer sometimes.
Yes, true.
Yeah, well, second that, I went back and consulted the staff slides, which were at least up before today, but at least they were there. And then I had a thing I wanted to refer back to that. So, one of those questions that maybe wasn't worth having everybody go back to look at that slide. So that great in the future. Hugely excited about the updated protected bike lanes project. I wish we had just had like a little bit more detail on the updated pedestrian connection. I still have concerns about how that all is going to feel, looking down upon the dining in the newly widened 40-foot alley. But all in all, I think it's great. I'm comfortable with the parking ratio. In the space. Glad that the median's going back in on 18th Street. And I do hope that staff and the applicant can talk about crossing.
The slides are going up, right?
Yes. I'm good, thanks. And then our virtual participants, if you have any final comments that you did not get a chance to make, Mike Dowell?
Yes, hi. Yeah, I think I would. I like the design. I'm glad you're preserving the structure. I would just ask if you can look at that mid-block crossing again. That's kind of more for the county. If we can make sure that the pedestrian access through the site is really written into the site plan conditions, that would be great. And if you have the opportunity to kind of look at biophilia and the landscaping across the entire site, since while you have the construction crews there, I think that might be a great opportunity. But I think it's a nice little project, and look forward to how it turns out. Thank you.
Thank you. Final comments, anything you haven't had a chance to reiterate? Joe McIntyre, then Jim Lantelmi.
Yeah, just, again, encourage the doc to actually, look in more detail about full electrification at the outset of the building to be consistent with the county's goal for carbon neutrality. And I think and again, echoes everybody else's comments about more trees, especially canopy trees, and thinking more broadly on how the site could be perhaps utilized better in the future, especially with hopefully shifting demand away from car ownership.
Great, thank you. Jim Lantelmi, then Ben Devanzo.
Yeah, I've already made my earlier comments. I stand by those. I pretty much agree with all the issues that have been raised tonight, and thoughtful comments from my fellow commissioners on it. I think I agree with those. I think it's a solid project overall. I'm happy to see this moving forward. I particularly am very happy with the applicant for finding a solution to what would have been the dead end between the flats and the new building. I'm really happy that got resolved in the way we wanted. So, kudos to you for that. Other than that, I look forward to seeing this at Planning Commission. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks. Ben Devanzo, and then we have 2 public speakers.
I'll just reemphasize. I think what I'll say from the start, since this is, I think overall this will be a good thing, hopefully for Eads, and does move us away from that tower in the parking lot, mega blocks that we have. But I do think that mid-block crossing at Eads is so essential, and I really do hope we can find more ways to counteract the lost trees, particularly by reducing existing surface parking on the lot.
Super, thank you. Now we have 2 public speakers. You each have 2 minutes. First we have Jeffrey Williams and then Bernie Byrne. Mr. Williams?
Hello, I'm Jeff Williams. I'm a neighbor in 22202. I have a couple of comments. One is directed at staff, and of course, I think they've already heard this. And I appreciate that staff has safety concerns about the mid-block crossing, but I think that underground connection under Route 1 is going to become really important, particularly when the Route 1 construction comes underway. And so I hope they consider to look very carefully at how they can support a mid-block crossing. Maybe it's not urgent now, but I think it's going to become very important. The second one goes to the applicant. I was actually delighted to see the solar installed on the roof of the Crystal Towers. And I had not seen that before. I was really excited about that. And then I realized there's a lot more space up there for more solar. And I'm thinking, well, is it possible that you can put more solar in and you can use that to maybe charge some cars down in the parking lot? So, you know, think about it. Anyway, that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Byrne?
Yes. Hello. The applicant has submitted a conceptual landscape plan that lists the species of all trees, shrubs, and perennials and grand coves. I commend the applicant for this, as applicants for most site plan committees projects do not contain this information. However, the plant list has a number of major deficiencies. I have asked the applicant and the landscape architect to submit a revised plant list in time for consideration of this meeting. However, the applicant has not, and the landscape architect has not done this. The public needs this information to make comments before the planning, at the time of the Planning Commission County Board meetings. About 3/4 of the plants are not satisfactory. Some are not native to Northern Virginia or even the United States. These can become invasive. Some are hybrids or cultivars. Their flowers are often sterile, produce no nectar, and feed no pollinators. If not sterile, they can become invasive. The plant list contains a number of grasses and sedges. These are wind pollinated. They don't have flowers that feed plant pollinators. Plant few of these. Another comment is they shouldn't have a mowed lawn in that public space. Mowed lawns are not biophilic. The plant list does not contain any milkweeds. To help implement the county board's monarch pledge to support and increase the county's monarch populations, you should plant common milkweed on all green roofs, tree trunks, and open space that see sunlight for much of the time. This is the only milkweed that plant which monarchs prefer to lay eggs, which grows also in all natural areas. You need this. I hope Laura Schraub, who is hearing this and understands what this project is missing. Over 140 species of insects and 450 insects are known to feed on common milkweed. Its nectar attracts many pollinators. Its sap and its flowers provide food. It is the most important food plant for monarch caterpillars in the Northeast and Midwest. Plant milkweed in shady areas. Forests and forest edges are natural habitat. Okay, so basically, we need this information by the Planning Commission meeting, if possible. You're going to do more harm. This whole project will do more harm to the environment than good.
Everybody for participating tonight. Thank you, SPRC members. Thank you, members of the public. Thank you very much, staff, Ms. Badger, Ms. Moore, Mr. Watson, and thank you very much, applicant. With that, this meeting is concluded. Thank you. Will you follow up with that or with